I've finished watching episode 5 of season 2 for the Fallout show a second time. This episode is entitled The Wrangler, and it likely refers to Robert House, I would say. The main revelation of this episode, according to him, whom Cooper Howard meets for real, formally, the Robert House whom we had seen in season 1 at that Doctor Strangelove style boardroom meeting, and earlier this season on TV. And in this episode, that man had been a body double. He actually says it. It wasn't surprising that the man whom Cooper Howard had met in the restroom during that veterans meeting had been the real Robert House. It's not a matter of if or even when, according to his calculations. It's who. He's adamant that he's not going to start the war. He's also adamant that none of the idiots, as he says, at that meeting will start the war. And he's convinced that the person is in the casino, or in the area at least. Now, there's a few candidates. I would say Hank McClane is probably the obvious candidate. We know that he's not reluctant to destroy large populations. He's also duplicitous enough to do things on his own. I think that the man whom Hank is addressing in that voice recording at the end of this season premiere is Robert House. Some people think he might be talking to the Enclave or someone in the Enclave, but I think it's Robert House. A dark horse candidate would be Cooper Howard himself. I think that would be an interesting twist, although it would be a challenge from a story writing perspective to make it plausible. But I think there's a third viable candidate. I know I'm not the only one who's thought of it, but I think it will be Barbara Welch, that milquetoast congresswoman who had been at that same veterans gathering, and she's also in this episode getting unceremoniously thrown out of Lucky 38. The moment I saw her again is like, she's got to be more important than her initial appearance would imply. The fact that she's a lone voice in a era of madness. She mentions that she doesn't accept any sort of corporate funding. She's very anti-corporate influence in the U.S. government, but I think things escalate to the point that she feels the only way to stop corporate influence is just to destroy the world effectively. It seems really silly, but I think that would be an interesting twist. That's my bet. Some interesting reappearances. Ma June, she serves the purpose of briefing Norm about the status of Lucy. And I like the resolve, the faith that he has in Lucy. He's adamant that she's probably alive despite what Ma June tells them. I like how she's empathetic to the Vulties, but not in all of them. Another side character who makes a memorable appearance, who's made memorable appearances and makes another one in this episode, would be that snake oil salesman / chicken lover. And I like that scene, that fake out of him being in pain as Hank dials up the power. He ends up being an effective messenger, intermediary between Hank and the ghoul. Him flying out that window and getting impaled, that's a shock. Obviously, ghouls have superhuman healing ability. The death claws, a bit disappointing. They kind of remind me of the T-Rexes from Jurassic Park in that they're intimidating as hell, but kind of slow moving. The ghoul's able to distract them long enough that he and Lucy can escape by sliding under that gate. It wasn't just one, it was 3, technically 4, because of that one Deathclaw chowing down on something. Maybe it was another Deathclaw that was dead. Really the main theme, now that I think about it, the coming together of characters and the tearing apart of those same characters. Looking at Norm and the Buds, I think he and Claudia become closer emotionally when she confides the details of her life. The fact that her parents, her friends, her pet are dead. And she confides with him that she can tell that he's not Bud's successor. Betty tells Stephanie in the prior episode that he is in fact dead. And then we've got Ronnie, who overhears that conversation, and they come to blows. And Norm ends up sprawled on the floor, just like Lucy. And speaking of Lucy, she and the ghoul come together in terms of like their bond. The ghoul drags her under that gate, advises her to go to a shop to buy something to overcome her drug addiction, advises her to puke out the window when they're in that hotel room. He's got water in his eyes when he tells her that he sold her out. That's them coming apart. You could argue that even though Hank and Lucy reunite at the very end of the episode, they're physically together, but in terms of emotionally, are they? Barb and Cooper, his flashback ends with him in their hotel room after that tropey drunken montage. He tells Barb that they need to talk. So maybe that leads to their discussion and apparent divorce. That would explain why Cooper doesn't have a vault like Barb and Janie. So that's like maybe the second biggest revelation. It also explains that first scene in the series premiere, those dads alluding to Cooper paying alimony. Another banger episode. I've said it before, but I think the strength of this series is having like multiple arcs, very different settings with different characters. They don't necessarily hit the same highs for everybody, but just having them rotate from one episode to the next keeps things interesting. 45 to 55-minute episodes, they move pretty quick. I think maybe the seasons would benefit by having maybe an extra episode or two, but I would say it's almost all killer, no filler, at least for this season.